Hi, in this video, we're going to demonstrate for you a simple and quick technique that we use to discover the central message that we sometimes want to communicate to different audiences or in different situations. The exercise is called Half-Life Your Message.
Half-Life Your Message is really easy. You stand up and for 60 seconds you talk fluidly about whatever topic you want. And then immediately after that 60 seconds is done, you have to start over. But here's the catch, you only get half the time. Now, importantly, when you start over, you're iterating on the exact same topic. You're not starting over from scratch and talking about something new. So you do 60 seconds, then you start over and do 30 seconds, and then immediately after that, you do it again in 15, and then again in 8. Now, the two key pieces of this is that you really should be standing up, and you really don't want to give yourself any time to pause between the 60, 30, 15, 8-second versions.
Yep. So we're just going to launch right into it. Elyse is going to demo it, and I've got my phone right here, and we're going to time it so that she'll get markers at the 60-second point, the 30-second point, the 15-second point, and the 8-second point so that she can track how long it's taking her. So, you ready to do this?
I need a topic.
So, your topic is, and by the way, she doesn't know what this is, so this is completely improvised. Just want to show you that you can do this without any preparation. So, your topic is, talk a little bit, you're an expert in communicating and helping people to communicate better. Talk a little bit about the importance of practicing communications to become better at it. Okay, so I'll give you a couple seconds to think about it. I'm going to make sure my phone's all set with the timer. All right. So, you ready to go?
Mm-hmm.
All right. 3, 2, 1, go.
So most people, when they look at me today, don't believe that by nature I'm a total introvert and that I actually was not at all effective in public speaking for a really long time.
Mm-hmm.
In high school, my favorite thing was to check out a big pile of books from the library and spend a weekend not talking to anybody, but just like curled up in my bedroom just reading. And it wasn't really until I got into some of my research experiences and started watching really effective communicators that I decided that I wanted to become more effective at public speaking. But then there was a
30 seconds.
And that conundrum was that I had no idea how to get from where I was, which was sort of quiet and mouse-like and not particularly effective, to being really effective. And the answer that I landed on was in focusing on specific skills and getting
15.
lots and lots and lots of practice. And that practice is, I think, really critical because you can't actually get better at something until you work the muscle to develop the skill. Mm-hmm. And with that and with consistent
5,
feedback,
4,
you really can get better
3,
at communicating.
2, and 1.
All
Nicely
right.
done. All right, so we're going to do the exact same thing, same core message, but this time only in 30 seconds. You ready?
Got it.
Go.
All right, so when people look at me today, they don't necessarily believe that in high school I used to be really introverted. And I didn't really know effectively how to be a good speaker. It wasn't really until I started thinking about how to break down communication skills
15.
and really starting to practice that I started getting better. And I think that this is really critical as people are learning to communicate, to get lots and lots of practice and lots of feedback as
5.
they're developing their skills so that they can become a better communicator.
Great. All right, 15-second version.
Mm-hmm.
Deep breath. Ready, set, go.
So by nature, I'm not actually a particularly effective communicator. And when I was learning how to be an effective communicator, the key thing for me was doing lots of practice and getting lots and lots of feedback.
5.
I think that this is really critical as people develop their communication skills, which are skills.
All right,
Oof.
nice.
Okay,
All right, pro tip, go for the 8. 8-second version.
let's do it.
All right, go.
By nature, I am not a particularly effective communicator, but I learned to be an effective communicator by practicing and integrating a bunch of feedback.
And there's the 8-second mark. Nicely done.
Thanks.
So this is the way it works. You just run through the iterations, 60, 30, 15, and 8. And in so doing, you discover what your core message is.
So for the second part of this video, we're going to help Brian here prepare for a presentation that he actually has coming up. So to contextualize,
Yes.
Brian, can you give us the context you're presenting in, the audience, and the goal that you really want to get across for your communication effort?
Sure. So the context is I'm giving this presentation at a public health organization, And the people who are going to be attending are all health professionals of different types. So lots of different professional backgrounds, but they're all interested in health professions in some way. And they're all there because they want to learn how to do health communication or health interventions better.
Okay.
So my goal for the presentation is to give them some concrete advice to help them be more effective at communicating with the public in different ways. And in particular, to help them understand how to best to communicate data or tables or other kinds of quantitative information to the public in ways that the public can then use it and understand it.
Okay, so just to make sure that we follow the appropriate steps to really scaffold half-life your message, let's go ahead and do some brainstorming.
Sure.
So what are some of the ideas that you actually want to communicate?
So one idea or one issue always is don't try to do too much. I'm really aware that there's lots of different things that we often want to communicate to the public about a particular health topic, and it's really easy to try and cram too much in there. So that's one thing. I want to help them prioritize, kind of like what we're doing here.
Sure.
Two, I really do worry that we often give people information, facts, but they don't know what it means.
Okay.
So I want to help them think about context. What can we do to give people context so that they have some idea of whether a number is good or bad, some idea of how to interpret what they have and hence be able to potentially use it. I think another component of it is I really want to make sure that people think about their goals. What's their intention? Why are we giving this information to the public or policymakers or other health professionals? Sort of what is the use pathway? And helping them to think about making sure that whatever way they're giving that information is going to help that person or group or organization fulfill their mission.
So those all sound like really important pieces, and I think that we have to be thoughtful here, and why we're doing Half-Life Your Message is to help you really narrow in that focus. And that'll help you, both you as a presenter, to make sure that you construct your presentation effectively around that message, but that message, if it's effectively communicated, will also help your audience walk away with what you want them to remember. So are you ready to do Half-Life?
All right, let's do this.
All right. Okay. You have 60 seconds on the clock. Get ready in 3, 2, 1, go.
So in health, we often are in the business of creating data, whether that's in a clinical context or in a public health context, and trying to communicate that to users. So this might be environmental monitoring data. It might be statistics about case rates, things like that. The challenge often is trying to figure out how do we help people use that information, be able to understand what it means for them. So one of the things I often see is that we as health professionals get caught up in making sure that our data are right, that they're accurate, but we don't spend enough time thinking about the context. How do we help people understand the meaning of those data? And a key element of that is providing reference standards. So action thresholds, normal levels, other kinds of points that somebody can compare to so that they can figure out whether the numbers are good or bad or what they ought to do about them. And so I think one of the things I want to emphasize is no, don't just think about the accuracy of your data, but think about what's the context that you're putting it in.
Excellent. Deep breath. 30 seconds on the clock, and 3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, so we have lots of data in health, but the challenge is trying to not just make that data accessible to people, but to make it understandable to people. And understanding requires reference standards. If I'm not familiar with a type of data, a number, then I don't know what it means. So we have to give people reference standards, things like action levels or thresholds or risk categories, things like that, to help them understand whether a number is good or bad, and hence be able to use it.
Excellent. 15 seconds.
15 seconds.
3, 2, 1, go.
So access to health data doesn't mean that people can use that data. We need to be able to understand the context. So action thresholds or risk categories or things like that, in order to understand whether numbers are good or bad and be able to use them.
Excellent. Pro version, 8 seconds.
All right.
Go.
When we give people numbers, we have to not just make sure that they're accurate, we also have to give people the context that they need in order to understand what those numbers mean.
Perfect. 8 seconds on the money. Well done.
All right.
Okay, so now we have a 2-step debrief process. So step number 1, what did you learn from that process?
So one thing I learned in that process was I was spending too much time doing the setup, thinking about all this background of the different types of data that we have, et cetera. That's all true, but that's not the core of my message. The core of the message here is this point about context. And I realized also as I went through that I didn't need to spend time telling people explicitly only focus on one thing. I needed to give them what that one thing was. So I focused in on that message about what the context is.
Okay.
And implicitly then was saying, this is your goal. Focus on this, and it's okay not to worry about other stuff.
Cool.
So that was one part of what I learned. I think another part of what I learned was thinking about being concrete. As I was going through that first session, the 60-second version, I realized as I was starting to talk about context that I also needed to be really clear about what I meant by context.
Oh, okay.
So
yeah.
I specifically made sure to talk about action thresholds or risk categories because I wanted people to have those concrete examples. And I hadn't thought that when we went through the brainstorming.
Okay. So I think that those are a couple of really key lessons, which means that now we have to ask the second part of the debrief question. So, do you like the message you came up with? And is it appropriate for your context, your audience, and your goal?
Yeah. I'm not sure. I mean, the 8-second version was nice. It doesn't have everything I want in it. Some of that detail, like the concrete examples, is important. So I really felt like I was closest with like the 15-second version. I do think it's appropriate, though. It fits the needs of this audience, right? These are professionals. They need concrete advice. And I was getting towards that, giving them a concrete takeaway. So it felt like I was hitting the right mark. Just need to focus in on the right balance between simplicity and those kinds of concrete advice.
Yeah, and I think that actually really highlights that all of the iterations of Half-Life actually have value, right? You can get clues for your narrative structures with your longer versions, and you can really narrow in on that core takeaway with the shorter versions.
Right.
Yeah. So do you feel like you learned something?
I did. I learned a lot.
Great. So, and I want to sort of zoom out and talk about its utility for other people as well. So just to be super transparent, I use Half-Life all the time.
Yeah.
I use it every time I have a major presentation or a meeting or a paper. I used it to help write my dissertation for each chapter of my dissertation and the dissertation as a whole. And it's something that I still use on an active basis. If you look at the recording thing on my phone, you'll see just it littered with Half-Life recordings.
I use it a lot in a variety of situations. The one that I probably use it the most on, though, however, is grants. When we're writing grants and we're trying to convince people to fund our research, the challenge is to tell a story, to make them understand why something is important, why they should care about it. And running Half-Life has been one of the best tools that I've come up with to figure out what it is that I want to get across about why somebody should care about a proposal that I'm writing or a paper that I'm writing or even just a presentation.
Yeah. So one of the things that we've learned by teaching this activity is that the single biggest barrier is getting people to try it.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, we've shown you here, it doesn't take that long. It's really pretty easy. And that you learn something through the process. I brainstormed a lot, but I learned something even after I'd done the brainstorming by going through this exercise. So please do consider it whenever you've got a message. Just take a few minutes, run through this process. We think you'll like it.